Hello everyone. Good evening and welcome. I'd like to take a moment, and I'm checking, I just did it too, to ask everyone to please silence your phones. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. Both the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University occupy the original homelands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe peoples. We honor, respect, and acknowledge the indigenous peoples forcibly removed from this territory whose connection remains today. St. Benedict's Monastery and St. John's Abbey previously operated boarding schools for Native children. Now students, faculty, and staff are working to repair relationships with our Native Nation neighbors. I'm Matt Harkins, Director of the Literary Arts Institute of the College of St. Benedict, and I'm here to introduce our visiting poet tonight, Hadara Nadav. And we're pleased for this event to be part of the Festival of Cultures sponsored by the Multicultural Center. Hadara Nadav is the author of 5 full-length books of poetry and 2 chapbooks. Her most recent book is The Animal is Chemical. She's received fellowships and awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Poetry Society of America, and Poetry Foundation. Hadara is also an old and dear friend. She was a member of the CSB SJU English department many years ago, and we're delighted to have her back amongst us. She's currently a professor of English at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. In The Animal is Chemical, we follow the narrator's struggle with illness and pain, the pharmaceuticals she takes for treatment. In a series of erasure poems carved out from the package inserts that accompany prescription drugs, we experience the uncertain promises of treatment. In the poem, Trust Us, we read, admit hearing voices that do not exist. Carry them with you. Pain comes to crush and eat you. Ask your doctor and pharmacist to keep you safe. Stroke your face with tenderness like a child. Pain and treatment have even deeper resonance through the book's probing and witnessing of the terrors of the Holocaust, from the massacres and mass graves to the ad copy used by the company that designed cremation ovens specifically for the death camps, and to the so-called medical experiments of Joseph Mengele, who asked his victims to call him uncle. These landscapes of pain and chemicals, of treatments that cannot be trusted, move back and forth from past to present throughout the book. In the poem, Singing Pills, we hear of my chemical sleep, ordered at the drugstore, my pharmacist, my God, my automatic refill. Please quell and quiet me. I am an ordinary I, unfree from history. Tonight, Hadara will read from some of her work, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. And we'll follow that up with a book signing. And without any further ado, we'll begin. Please join me by welcoming Hadara Nadav.
How is the volume in the back? Good? Okay, great. Matt, thank you so much for that generous introduction. I want to say thank you to the Literary Arts Institute, to Matt Harkins, Jessica Harkins, Rachel, Christina, Matt Callahan, and to the Festival of Cultures as well. I'm really delighted to be here. And I just wanted to spend 1 minute saying how extraordinary the faculty are in the English department. Seriously. And Chris as well, who I had lunch with today, and we talked about the medical humanities and the ability of language to heal us or to harm us. both Chris and I are working with medical professionals and trying to help them think about the language of healing. How doctors talk to us is crucial and important, and also, of course, how we talk to ourselves and each other. So I'm going to read an opening poem that's for a new book that doesn't yet exist, that's called What Do You Do for a Living? I like to mess with people when they ask me what I do for a living, and I used to say all kinds of random stuff just for fun. But most recently I decided to tell people I'm a poet. I'm on the line picking up my kids at school, and someone's like, "What do you do for a living?" "I'm an accountant." And I'm like, "I'm a poet." And then the conversation just dies. People are like, "What? What do you mean you're a poet?" And I'm like, "That's what I actually do for a living. It's what I do to survive." Do I necessarily make a living doing it, like a salary? No. But it's what I do to live. What do you do for a living? Full-time mother, full-time smother, full-time teacher, full-time failure, full-time nail biter, full-time queen of never-ending laundry, full-time cracked insomniac, full-time I could bite my house in half with my family still sleeping inside it, full-time white supremacists on TV, full-time Camp Auschwitz t-shirts for sale, full-time anxiety, full-time rage, full-time taker of pills, full-time sending my pharmacist kids to college, full-time talk, full-time full of shit, full-time doom-scrolling apocalyptic news on demand, full-time all of this data will drown me, full-time headache ripping through my black dragon eye, full-time Zoom meetings that absorb all available daylight, full-time crawling towards death minute by minute, full-time standing 6 feet apart from any human thing, full-time worship of the bagworm I stand very close to and watch for days, full-time chewing maple leaves in slow motion, then tucking her speckled head inside her sticky, twiggy cocoon, full-time hiding myself inside the sticky cocoon of my day, full-time chewing my skull from the inside out while hanging by a thread, full-time raising my little white flag, full-time not transforming into any winged thing, full-time screw a pretty ending. How do I begin again? That's for the book that doesn't exist yet. It's thinking about it. Okay, so I'm going to read some poems from The Animal is Chemical. This is a book that looks to intergenerational trauma and pharmaceutical and medical trauma, and then has some pharmaceutical erasures in it as well, which I'll read near the end. I'm going to begin with the opening poem. This is Dybbuk. Do people know what a Dybbuk is? Some crowds do, some not. So a Dybbuk comes from Jewish folklore. A Dybbuk is a disembodied spirit that inhabits a human host. And women with mental health conditions are often said to be possessed by Dybbuks. The cool thing is the way to get rid of a Dybbuk is through language. You have to have like a rabbi or a holy person pray over you, and the right combination of words will release your Dybbuk. This poem also speaks to stereotypes about Jews, including that we have horns, and also glosses the historical burning of bodies. Dybbuk. My horns are disappearing. Parts of my furred ears rub away in the red wind. Here, the wind can take you in pieces. My long Semitic nose and curly hair, like a calligraphy of barbed wire. Someone is trying to burn the girl out of me. Diamonds line my eye sockets. Diamonds in my fever-lit brain. my neck a fat matchstick. I am such spectacular light, shock of incarnadine that ignites even the shadows. There are no shadows here. Only 5 golden finches rising like a hand into the blistering crown of a cherry tree. A myth in which a god sets us on fire and then sets us free. The next poem I'll read is The Singing Pill, which Matt talked about in the introduction. I like writing poems in conversation with other poems, and this is in response to a poem by Matt Rasmussen from his book Black Aperture. And the book explores his brother's suicide by gun violence. And in this one particular poem, Rasmussen dials time backwards and moves from the finding of his brother's body beyond him shooting himself to leaves reattaching themselves to trees. And I was so fascinated with the idea that a poem could do whatever it wanted with time. It could roll time backwards, it could roll times forward, it can go back 200 years or 500 years or roll into the distance. And so I took that idea from him. This is The Singing Pills. I spit up the pills that look like pills, place them back inside the orange safety bottle, place the bottle next to vitamins, aspirin, glue, then hit the backspace key and delete the scene, now chroma white and starry. Evening retreats into day, and the light does not yet hurt. I smile all day long and erase the trance of fire each time it erupts. Delete, delete. Each of my dead holds a torch inside me, bubbling up my throat, lungs gummed with creosote. I reverse into the early morning blankery when the pills still sing me to sleep, deep in the blue milk of oblivion. All of my wicks for the moment unlit. The laundry in piles, absent of bodies. Each version of myself is a day collapsed in a flowered basket, half fog, half sludge, and twinkling. My chemical sleep ordered at the drugstore. My pharmacist, my God, my automatic refill. Please quell and quiet me. I am an ordinary I, unfree from history. Hi, everyone. The next poem I'm going to read is The Ancestors Take the Reins of My Throat, and there's a little quirky backstory here. Okay, so I was living in Lincoln, Nebraska, going to grad school, and we had these new older neighbors who moved in, seemed like a really nice couple, and they invited my husband and I over for tea, and for some reason my husband bailed, so I just went. And so I walked in, we had tea, we were chatting, and there was this like beautiful little orange cat that was by the front door. And it was very still, sleeping really peacefully. And the whole time I was there, like an hour and a half, the cat never moved. And, you know, we're getting ready to go, or I'm getting ready to go. And I was just like, you know, your cat is so sweet. I love how peacefully it's sleeping. And the wife said to me, oh, well, you know, my cat's not really alive anymore. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, that was our beloved cat, and we had it stuffed, and it used to hang out by the door, so that's just where we keep it now. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Oh, that's really sweet. Like, I couldn't actually decide how I felt about it, and I still can't. But anyway, that somehow made its way into this poem. The ancestors take the reins of my throat. Does anyone have a stuffed pet here? So that's not like really a typical thing. Oh, okay. So I'm not alone in being totally bugged out by it. I did, when I lived when I moved to Kansas City, there was a woman who kept telling me she wanted to knit a sweater out of my poodle, Ella, and I was like, I don't want to wear my dog. But she was really excited about it because she could make it happen. And I was like, no, I'm good. Thanks, though. Anyway, the ancestors take the reins of my throat. There is always a we in my mouth, huddled against my teeth. I start to speak and out pours smoke with a leathered bit of tongue. Numbles on a notebook spread out to dry. Numbers inked onto the vellum skin of history. This is a taxidermist's art. Carve and scrape down. Assemble grief, plaster, and paint. A little paste for gold glass eyes. Didn't the neighbor's cat stay obediently frozen in an orange circle of light by the front door? Curled up there, forevered, a furred offering, gutted, bent, leashed by love, as I am a shell for others, my bitten, lips peeled wide, the hollowed body filled with cotton, wire, and the wind of ghosts. This next poem I'm reading for Christina. It is Every Object is Someone. My previous book, The New Nudity, looked at the inner lives of objects and body parts, and I had this idea that if I wrote about objects, nothing bad would happen, and then, I'm an artist, so all kinds of crazy shit happen. But I have this idea that objects contain resonance and energy and spirit to them. Like I'm wearing my parents' wedding band, which my mom almost threw at me and didn't want anymore. And somehow in my family, I've become the holder of objects. So I have my great aunt who died during Kristallnacht. She was a lace maker, and I have these pillowcases that she made, and I never met her, but I have them in an ancestors area, and I hold these items close. My grandfather, my mom's dad, died when she was 14. I never met him. I have his eyeglasses. He was a visual artist, and I have the pens and pencils that he used to make a living. And I've never met him. He died when my mom was 14, but I feel like I can feel him and I know him through these objects. So that's sort of the orientation for where this poem came from. This is Every Object is Someone. My father, my blue cup, the cherry table in the kitchen, my father again. The red lamp overhead bobbing like a half moon, my toothless grandmother. See her inside the picture viewer, a green plastic tube the size of my thumb. She sits on a shelf with hairpins and an ivory lace pillowcase sewn by her sister, whose face I wear, her eyes and lips. Olga, who hanged herself after Kristallnacht. Night of breaking. Every object alive and not alive. Every object a little glitter inside. A glow that could burn this house down. This next poem is Prayer with Percocet, which I think I spoke about in one of the classes I visited. I saw Matt and Christina's class today, and then whose class was I in yesterday? It was in Betsy's. I think I talked about a couplet in here. So Prayer with Percocet. And I've asked this question before, but I've heard different things. Is it only the Jewish tradition where when you visit a grave, you put a stone, like sort of acknowledging that you've been there? You place a stone on the headstone? That's not a familiar gesture to other folks in here. Okay, so it's a Jewish tradition. Yeah, it's a way of just, you're sort of like acknowledging that you've been there, but you're also acknowledging the dead. And so that comes in here for a bit. Prayer with Percocet. Lost in a cemetery again, a maze of losses. Section C, row 6, plot 18. Red roses, rows of endings, and the scent of oranges. At the center, I am surrounded by stone. Leave a pebble behind. Didn't I hope a pill would keep my father's heart alive forever? Didn't I hope a pill would take care of it? The gods of science were wrong. Ghosts floating off in their white coats. What can you do for me, ghost-colored pill, asleep in my pocket? Miniature moon who could crush me, who is almost good. In the morning, I check the label and see my own face in flames. One pill and I can watch my pain from across the room. I slowly slide my breath between the knives in my neck. My sunrise of painkillers, blood orange. Yeah, we take medication hoping we're going to get pain relief in one way, and then pain says, ha, 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 we exist in another way. This is I Took the Drugs. I did not write this poem about this medical experience. However, I had shoulder surgery in February, and I totally had to take pills to take pills to take pills, and it kept going. So I was given opioids that made me really sick. So I had to take pills to be able to tolerate the opioids, and then those pills made me sick, so I had to take a third set of pills, and they weren't really working, so then I had to take like a mega anti-inflammatory for pain control. So I was taking 4 medications for what one probably should have done and wasn't doing. Yeah, so that was fun. Okay, I took the drugs. I took the drugs marked sleep for sleep, and the drugs marked joy to trudge through grief, and the yellow drugs to crack my Vaseline smile, ooze trickling the length of my spine, the hair on my arms electrically charged. The stop my mind from shaking drugs for blood-dipped dreams. The stop crying drugs that left me hazed in a hangover for empty weeks. The taste of copper licking my lips. I took the drugs for side effects, the drugs for drugs, bottle shape they shoved me in, body of sludge. Call me the great undead with a pharmaceutical edge and a head full of mud. But I believe, if I believe hard enough, if I am a believer on my knees, praying for ease, oblivion, please. The pink circle by day, blue ovoid by night, white pearl for when my chest ruptures into flame, lullabied by the dead and the history of the dead, my wounds flickering beneath my skin. Oh, the joy continues. Thank you for laughing, Matt. Appreciate it. He remembers my humor. So I'm going to read a few of these pharmaceutical erasure poems. So I was a medical editor for a few years, And I always wanted to find a way to use some of my weird knowledge and experience with language for poetry. So pharmaceutical package inserts are nearly incoherent and sort of made to be so folded up into tiny little origami squares and printed in 8-point font. And written in tiny little columns in a language that is not meant for human consumption. Like, it's not patient-facing language. However, the language that is found there, which I use to write and edit, can also save your life. I worry a lot about our movement toward online drugs and television commercial advertisements, YouTube advertisements that are like, we can solve all your problems, just call this number. And a real doctor will not take your patient history and prescribe you drugs. Things are going to work out great. What the heck? I see those advertisements all the time, and I'm like, where is patient care? What is the language that we need to hear at the moment that we're suffering and we open up a bottle of pills? What do you actually need to hear? I love you. You're going to be okay. You're going to get through this. Do you need a pill right now, or do you just need to take a couple deep breaths? I don't know what it is. I'm not actually anti-medication, but I am pro-research and critical thinking about the drugs that we are told we need. This is Your Mind is Night. This is an erasure, so I'm taking language from pharmaceutical package inserts to create a poem. This is based on the tretinoin gel or Retin-A package insert. So it's a common wrinkle, acne medication. It turns out that you are flammable if you use it, and you should not light a cigarette or be near an open flame for about 15 minutes and after you apply the medication to allow it to fully dry. And this is such a significant side effect, being flammable, that it's written in all caps and bolded in your package insert, which you will not read. Now you know. Your mind is night. Your mind is night. Your eyes open wounds. Your whole face may become skeletal. Fire is your nature. Flame is your friend. Deep inside your skin, New Zealand white rabbits report excessively troublesome feelings of warmth, inflammatory lesions, peeling of the total body surface, a red, blistered day. Question your toxic nature. Question the human risk. Death is excreted in human milk with alcohol, spices, and lime. You can't wash it away. Use extreme caution. You are flammable. It's literally in all caps in the poem as well. I'm like, this is amazing. I need to keep this typography happening. So, anyone on albuterol? Okay, we got a couple. My son has walking pneumonia. He just started it. It's not going well, but I hope it improves. This is before difficulty from the albuterol patient information from Medline Plus and ProAir patient information. So just like a heads up, I'm not making any of this stuff up. It's actually from the package inserts. So there's something like, 23, if you open the package insert, there are 23 steps you have to follow. And then there are about a half dozen figures that show you how to use this thing. And I'm like, okay, no pharmacist explains any of this shit to you, and your doctor won't either. And if you're having an asthma attack and you look to the package insert for information, you would totally be dead by the time you got through the directions. And I'm like, this is nuts. Holy crap. So my son was given, we're going through this now. He was just given his inhaler yesterday, and he hates it because it hurts him. And he wasn't given a spacer, which I think he was supposed to have, and no one gave it to him. And so he's just this 10-year-old who's trying to breathe, and it's been not going well. Okay, but we're sending him good thoughts, and I'm going to see him tomorrow, and he's going to be like, I feel better, Mama. Right. Thanks for having my back. Okay, before difficulty, before chronic, before 4 times a day, before but will not cure your condition. Step 1, step 3, step 7, breathe. Figure B, figure I, figure K, breathe. Do not stop breathing. Remember this last paradoxical disclaimer. You are no longer plastic. You are pounding in your throat. Your lungs are foreign objects, wrong and wrong. Count down how many seconds you have left. Air will change to red and shake. Breath no longer a part of the body. Hold on one second here. What the hell is paradoxical doing in a pharmaceutical package insert? Is that supposed to be comforting? What about the word wrong twice in a package insert? Like, if you do this, you're wrong. If you do this, you're also wrong. Paradoxically, keep breathing. Like, that's in the package insert. What? Okay, this is two more. Carry an identification card. This is from the dexamethasone drug information from Medline Plus. Dexamethasone sort of made the news during COVID. It was commonly being prescribed then. Turns out it's also used for cancer and colitis. Carry an identification card that indicates your body, your land, certain forms of blood. COVID, cancer, colitis, confusion, large doses of loss. If you miss your mind, if you need to protect the lace of your heart, if the victim has collapsed, send a report to the administration of combat. Write down signs of trouble, the matter you cough up. Tartrazine, gray or green, redness bruising your throat. I will hear you. Tell me your history of war. Just saying, again, the words war and combat are in the package insert. What? Yes, they are. This is how you use this drug. These are the side effects. And my favorite, that this glosses favorite, when the victim has collapsed and is unconscious, have them call for help. Really? Do you know how many times that's repeated in the package inserts I looked at? Regularly. How do you call for help if you are dead or in a coma? Isn't that interesting? Some lawyer came up with that. I'm going to end with trust us, which Matt also quoted from. This is from the cyclobenzaprine or Flexeril patient and prescribing information from Medline Plus. I love Flexeril. I'm not anti-drug. I have a back injury. It's a muscle relaxer. It has helped me sleep when I'm having a crazy back blowout. Any Flexeril people in here? You might be a little young. Oh, okay. Yeah, it depends on the sort of the age of the crowd. If it's like older folks, like half of the people are like, yep, we like Flexeril too. Okay, well, it's in your future. Trust us. Trust us. Relax. Relax the brain and nervous system, the mouth. Swallow your heart. Swallow it with applesauce. Swallow without chewing. Your heart has a history of failure. Your heart is a blue gelatin sphere consumed by red thoughts. Admit hearing voices that do not exist. Carry them with you. Pain comes to crush and eat you. Ask your doctor and pharmacist to keep you safe. Stroke your face with tenderness like a child. Thank you. Okay, so we're rolling into our Q&A.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what kind of questions do you have?
Do I need a microphone or can you hear me?
Is it recording or I can hear you fine.
Yeah, I think we'll go.
You think you're good?
Yeah.
So one question I have is when you write these poems, do you have like an idea of like a compilation that you want, or does it just kind of spur of the moment, you write it down and then like revise from it? Like what's your process to get something from like the drug insert, like what, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it changes for the drug poems and the non-drug poems. So for the pharmaceutical erasures, I collected package inserts from medications that I and my family had taken in the last few years. And I was completely appalled by how many drugs we had taken for various things. And I was like, really? Like even my daughter had chronic ear infections. My son was like a repeat strep throat person and sometimes had to be on 2 and 3 rounds of antibiotics to treat the same strep throat infection. And I was like, oh my God, what, really? Oy. So I would take those package inserts and just sit down at night, usually like 9:30 when the house is, 2 kids are asleep, husband's asleep, dog is still bothering me. But she's very sweet, Disco, she's a white standard poodle, but she's a pain in the ass, but also sweet. I would start sifting through these package inserts and looking for language that was weird or surprising. One of the package inserts, one on sertraline, uses the word disorder 7 times in it. And I was like, reading this package insert feels like it's assaulting me. It's saying disorder, 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 disorder. And in the middle of the poem, there's just the word disorder again and again and again. Like if you weren't having depression and anxiety before you read the package insert, you have it after reading it. Like you are ill, you are messed up, messed up, messed up. Like it's a lot. I would take words and start kind of gluing them together. I did decide, people do erasure poems in different ways. Sometimes they follow the order of language very strictly. I allowed myself to take words and group them together in any order. And there's so much redundancy in the package insert that helped me make it sort of new in each poem. And somehow I thought about it as being akin to translation. Like I was taking language that was wooden and weird and was not patient-facing. It's doctor and pharmacist facing. And I was like, how can I take these weird words and string them together in another way that reveals something else? Some truth about life, some realization about trauma and illness and healing. And something about it felt akin to translation. We should talk about that, Jessica, who I know does a lot of translation work. My process for the not pharmaceutical poems is I typically write in response. I like the idea of being in conversation. So I typically sit down to write with 3 or 4 books of poetry that are compelling to me in some way or difficult in some way, and maybe 1 or 2 books of visual art, and I just read and look until something catches. In that way, writing doesn't feel lonely to me. It feels like I'm in conversation with people who have no idea that they're in conversation with me, but I'm in conversation with them. Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, other folks about the writing process, the writing life, teaching, editing.
So in the animal as chemical, you do a lot of sort of exploration with form within the writing that you do, more so than I've seen in some other, full-length poetry books. So can you talk a little bit about how you sort of think about how you like form the poems, and what sort of guides you as you process structure and how that communicates?
So I love thinking about form. I teach a poetic forms class, and I have certain defaults that I have to call myself on. I like writing prose poems. I like writing poems in couplets. Does that mean that every single poem for the rest of my life needs to be in prose poems or needs to be in couplets? No. So when I compose a poem, I try to call myself out and say, okay, what tricks are you doing that you already know how to do? I love the idea of writing and art making as discovery. I'm doing something, even if the reader can't detect it, I'm doing something new for me that makes it fun and exciting and new. So I just did an exercise with my students where I brought in 24 by 36 sheets of newsprint, and I had them take a poem that wasn't working or something wasn't gelling, rewrite it on the page in a completely different form. So if it was couplets, put it into tercets, put it into quatrains. If it was left justified, make it right justified, make it center justified. And then try it one more time in a completely different form. And then start to press on it and think about, is there hidden language in here? Are there hidden associations between stanzas? Where is the language prosy? And you can kind of cut out lines or phrases that are just sort of deadening. And then decide what form it needs to be in. Does it need to be? So I did this exercise along with my students, and I had a prose poem that wasn't working. And that's because it needed to be in couplets, my other default. But it worked much better in couplets, and I found 3 hidden stanzas inside. So something about the prose poem form, there were associations that weren't being fleshed out. And when I put it in these small couplets on the page, I was like, how am I getting from here to there? There's a whole idea and image cluster that I could push on and explore a little more. So now it's in couplets. So I do know writers, especially formalist writers, who are like, I'm going to write a villanelle. I'm going to write a sestina. I'm going to write a book of sonnets, and they lock in that way. I like to mess with myself and to mess with form. So I think something is this, and then I push against it. And it just allows me to discover and not move into default. It's part of the reason I don't compose on a computer, because it makes too many choices for me. I want to invent Microsoft Word for poets. It includes no capitals at the beginning of every line. Shutting off grammar. Oh my God, grammar help is such a pain in the ass. For a poet, when you're like manipulating syntax and language, that kind of stuff makes me insane. And I know there's some way I can do that I've never figured out. So if you want to gently and easily give me directions to do that, that's fine. But also, it forces you to the left. Every time you hit return, it forces you to the left margin. There are poems to be written that are right justified. There is language waiting inside the middle of the page. And working on the computer sort of makes these formal defaults. So for somebody who's interested in form, I would encourage you to get unlined paper and let the language kind of drift you or drift with the language and guide you to whatever form it needs. Not every poem should be in the same form for the rest of your life. Yep. Yeah, other folks. Mm-hmm.
What would be something that you would like college-age students to kind of take away from the reading cycle?
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of difficult subject matter. It took me a really long time in my writing life to get to that. For me, personally, let your dead speak through you and guide you. They can be your allies as a writer and as a person. And do what you can to share the work. So, for instance, giving readings or publishing my work. I would say folks like Emily Dickinson, Natasha Trethewey, there were poets who were very important to me when I was working through grief and my ancestry, my family history, who taught me that you could write through grief and come out the other side. And it turns out we're all going to experience sickness and illness and death. Yay, I know this is really light shit. But all to say, that this is part of being human. I happened to grow up in a family that was filled with silences. And so I think the overarching theory was that if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. Nobody ever dies. No dog has ever died. No grandparent has ever died. The Holocaust never even happened. Poof. And I didn't know what to do with all of those silences. So writing was one of those things that really helped me kind of give shape to and voice to these silences. So I think don't be afraid. Or here's the other piece. If you're afraid, that's okay. You can still write. You can still write when you're afraid, and you'll survive it. Yeah. Thanks for that question.
I have a two-part question.
Oh, and then, yeah.
Oh, no, sorry.
Could you talk about your poet friend group?
My poet friend group. Okay. Yeah, this is a thing. I think poets have little friend groups, like people we torture all the time. So that would be my friend Simone Mensch, who's a wonderful, wonderful poet out of Chicago. And I met her by writing her fan mail. I'm a huge fan of writing fan mail. She published these dazzling prose poems. I had never seen anything like it before in the Denver Quarterly. And I was like, oh my God, these are devastating. And then I met her at AWP, and she was working on a manuscript and having a really hard time. And she's like, do you want to read this? And I was like, yes. And then I gave her feedback on her manuscript. And then I was like, I have a manuscript. Can you look at it? And she said yes. And we're very, very dear friends. My friend Allison Bennis-White, she writes wonderful prose poems and poems in the long line. Very, very elegant. Strangely, and I think uniquely, she has had 5 friends commit suicide over her lifetime. So 3 of whom knew each other, which is not uncommon in how suicide works, that it works through groups or through schools. And she wrote so kind of beautifully and unflinchingly about this experience. So I tortured her during Zoom, and I was like, I know we don't know each other, but I like your poems, and can we have a glass of wine and hang out on Zoom? So we swap poems. I think one of the amazing things, I have students who say things like, do I have to major in creative writing to be a writer? Or do I have to get an MFA, a graduate degree, to be a writer? And I'm like, no, you don't. But one of the amazing things being a creative writer, a creative writing major, or being in an MFA program can give you is community. And I was relentless. I would find the 2 or 3 people in any workshop I was in who were good readers for me, and I would say, we're going to have coffee together and we're going to swap poems. And I have done that forever. And sometimes those collaborations, interactions last for a semester, and sometimes they last for a lifetime. If you find people in your workshops who are good readers for you, be relentless. Make them your friends. And also, it's an exchange, right? You're giving to them and they're giving to you. And you can build a beautiful friendship out of that. So also, I would say my friend, another wonderful poet, Kevin Proofer, he is a reader of my books. And Kevin is a relentless exerciser, and he walks. And so he's always walking, and he will talk to me about my manuscript while he's breathing heavily and walking like throughout Houston. He's like, I think this poem is working really well. This book should be in 6 sections, not 8 sections. And I'm like, all right. You see, he's completely correct. He has great advice. So yeah, find your people and keep them close. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. Jessica?
Oh, so I'm hearing the end of this, and as a superstitious person, I just need to know the full sentence. I have a 2-part question. The first is just my superstitious nature and the way that I like to think magically. So when you said something about if you write about an object, nothing bad will happen, like to the object or to the person. What was that?
Did I say that? That's so cool.
Something about nothing bad will happen, whether to the object, to you, to the person. I just don't know.
If I write, did I say that?
I wrote it down.
I have no idea what I was talking about, but I love that. If you write about an object, nothing bad will happen.
And I was like, I missed the end of the sentence. Did someone else hear that?
What did I say?
Well, I think you said I had coach. I feel like.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. You got my train. All right. So my third book, Lullaby with Exit Sign, mostly a book of prose poems, was about the death of my father from Lyme disease, which it took him, he was dying for about 20 to 25 years. If you know folks with Lyme disease, this makes sense to you. You're violently ill, you're okay. You're violently ill, you're hospitalized for 3 months. You're okay for 6 months, you're hospitalized for 2 years. And then my mother's cancer diagnosis. And it was such a heavy, difficult book. I'm like, I'm gonna write objects and everything's gonna be okay. Everything's gonna be fine. It's gonna be light. I wrote about zombies. I wrote about a door. I wrote about a wine glass. I wrote about a thumb. What bad can happen there? So, okay. It turns out I'm me, and, all my crap is trailing behind me even when I think everything's going to be okay. And, inevitably, there are a half dozen poems about the Holocaust. There are poems about my father's illness, about my mother's cancer, even while I'm just trying to write about objects. I gave it to myself as an assignment. I fell in love with, as a teenager, I fell in love with Gertrude Stein's Tender Buttons, which meditates on objects. I barely understand what's happening, but there's a giddiness and excitement about language, and I was like, whoa, this is cool. Pablo Neruda writes about objects, Francis Ponge writes about objects, and I was like, this is a cool way for me to historically be in conversation with other writers, and I'm just writing about objects. Nothing bad can happen. I'm an artist. Things happen. And people say to me, why are poets so depressed? Why is your stuff so dark? We don't need to figure out the good stuff and the happiness, the joys. They're good and they're happy. We need to figure out the hard stuff. How do you live with that? How do you live with joy? You do it. You walk around and you smile and you feel good. That's it. How do you deal with death? How do you deal with illness? How do you deal with pain? That shit is hard. That's the stuff that you need to work through. So thus poetry, thus music, thus painting. Yeah. So you are correct. I did say that. Thank you for saving me on that, Rachel. Much appreciated.
I was thinking that was life advice. Like, nothing bad will happen.
It sounds like good life advice, right? It was an aspiration. I'm going to write about a ring, and things are going to be fine. Yep. When you're writing about zombies, things are going sideways. Yep.
You mentioned about language's ability to heal. How do you see that active in poetry and beyond?
Yeah. So a couple different things. I think about how, I don't know, let me get specific. Like talking to my mom. who's a very difficult person, sometimes she can say the right thing, and I feel so heard and seen and loved. And the other, like 80 to 85% of the time, she says stuff that lacerates me. She lives in New Jersey, I live in Kansas City, like we're far away. We just have the phone to exchange, like, to talk to each other. There's no email, and texting is disastrous. She's 89, it's just not working out for her. But I think about how, I don't know, how much of an emotional hit, how much resonance comes from language. Again, the good that she says can make me feel okay about the world for days. And there's also, of course, the inverse, right? I'm like, why was I ever born? Why was she born? The world is on fire. There's war. There's famine. There's... And then, so your question, can you ask your question one more time? Because there was another piece I was going to talk about.
You see language
In
poetry.
Yeah, in poetry. So one of the things I love about reading poetry is when I read something that I recognize almost as if it could have come out of my own mouth. C.D. Wright quotes Jack Gilbert as saying, "Poetry helps us suffer more efficiently," which I think is fascinating. I'm reading a brilliant new book by Jenny George about the death of her mother, and there are certain things that she says in there that I have never been able to articulate for myself about the death of my father. And it gives me this kind of recognition and makes me feel like I'm less alone in the world. So I think one of the great gifts of poetry is that it makes us feel less alone in the world. It keeps us company during difficult times. And one of the things to think about is how music does this for us. We go through a breakup, we go through a loss, and we listen to the same sad album or sad songs again and again, and they keep us company. They carry us. That language makes us feel heard. It gives us language to articulate what feels, too large and insurmountable. And for me, poems do the same thing. So it's not like I said something tonight that, most of my poems are pretty dark. It's not like I said something that made you be like, oh, I'm going to skip out of here and my life's going to be great. But possibly there's something in here that felt true, or that resonated with some other experience that you've had. And I would love to think made any of you, for any minute of the reading, made you feel less alone in the craziness of being alive. Yeah. I also teach in our medical school, which is really fun. I was a medical editor for a few years, and for the third year, I'm going to co-teach a medical humanities class with a doctor. And we talk a lot with these sort of fourth and fifth year med students about the language of care and how doctors need to pay attention to how they're talking to their patients. And how do you talk to a 6-year-old? And how do you talk to a 12-year-old? And how do you talk to an 80-year-old? How do you give somebody a cancer diagnosis? Is there language that's helpful and that's harmful? And yes, there is. And certainly medical professionals need to pay attention to that. And I don't know, so do all of us, really. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Matt. Thanks.